Hi everyone, happy Wednesday. This is Jane Lovsky, your partner for bookkeeping and operational support, and I have Irene Sinatskaya, who is your partner for employment law, and she is a partner at Sinatskaya and Univer PC. And today we're going to talk about Employee Handbook, which is a document that communicates companies' mission, policies, and expectations. And employers usually give this to employees during the time of the employment, and it should be drafted by an attorney or at least reviewed by an attorney. And so we're lucky to have Irene, who's going to take us through Handbook. And I'd like to hand this over to you, Irene.
Thank you so much. Happy Wednesday, everyone. So an employee handbook, the purpose of it is to really serve as a guide or as a manual for employees and for them to really be able to consult the policies of the company, of the employer. And what the employee handbook a lot of the times includes in it are those protective policies or also industry specific policies as well. And I'll say this a couple of times today, but it is very, very important that this employee handbook is reviewed with an attorney, that it's also actually reviewed with your accountant as well for the accounting and payroll policies, which are very, very important part of the employee handbook. And it's important that it's revised quite often anytime any policies change, because you are held to your employee handbook. We've talked in the past about the Department of Labor claims. We've talked about various other employment matters that come up on wage and hour claims. And oftentimes, one of the first things that be it the Department of Labor or the courts will ask for is to see all of the policies that are in place for the company. They're going to ask to see, is there an employee handbook or a set of documents together? And really the employee handbook is that set of policies and that set of documents. And so I'll start, there's a bit of an outline here, and this isn't an exhaustive list. Certainly there could be additional items that are needed on this list, but I'll start with when to provide the employee handbook, of course, at time of hire. So the employee handbook should be reviewed and it should also be acknowledged, meaning signed for by the employee. The employee should know all the terms in it and they should have the right to take a day or two to review it if need be with their attorney. And because they're reviewing all the policies, you again need to make sure that anytime a new policy is put into effect or something is revised, if it's on paid time off or certain break time policies that we've discussed in the past, it has to be updated in the employee handbook. And so it should be revised. I always say at least annually, because you should take an opportunity to look at any new laws that are to take effect in the next year. It should be revised if there's ever a policy change or any additional documentation that may be needed that the employee may need to provide to the company to allow the employee to know ahead of time what needs to be provided. And also if there are any relevant law changes. And oftentimes November, December is when we start reviewing all the employee handbooks for our clients just to see if there's anything new that's going to take effect in the new year. And laws come into effect not just in January, so we do review these very often, but sometimes when we have at least somewhat of a hint of what the next year will look like and any new laws that will come into effect the following year, we take that opportunity to do so in November or December. As I said, also, it says here, you should definitely have an employee sign an acknowledgement form that they did receive the employee handbook and that they acknowledge all the terms in it. That acknowledgement should be kept in their file for at least 7 years following the end of employment. The employee handbook can also be provided physically or digitally. It's not a requirement that you print out the employee handbooks. We've seen some that are above 70 pages, so there's no requirement that you print out every single page. Certainly it can be reviewed electronically and transmitted electronically to the employee. And so now we get on to what should the employee handbook contain. And again, just wanted to give that warning that the employee handbook outline that I have here is by no means meant to be an exhaustive list. It also is not industry specific. So it doesn't include, if you're in the hospitality industry, any specific rules or laws that might pertain to your industry. If you're in healthcare, of course, there are going to be additional protection and confidentiality protections that are required by law that we wouldn't list here, just not to confuse. So it's very, very important that, again, these employee handbooks are prepared, reviewed with an attorney, because we're just going over what I've seen in the past as the main topics but by no means are these the only topics. And of course, I'm going to start with the anti-discrimination harassment. It's very, very important that the anti-discrimination or harassment policy is incorporated, at least in part, into the employee handbook. It's okay to have a standalone policy, and most companies do. In part, though, it should be incorporated into the employee handbook as well. And so with that will come any complaints or grievance reporting that the way that the company handles those complaints, the process should also be in there as well. Likewise, any confidentiality or privacy policies, those may very well already be in the employee agreement with the employee. But again, there should be a restatement of the company-wide privacy and confidentiality clauses in the employee handbook, as well as anti-retaliation, equal opportunity, employment act, disciplinary procedures that might take place for a breach of any one of the policies in the employee handbook, any of the code of conduct for the company. And then you go into the really specific rules and procedures. And those are going to include your paid time off, any hours, schedules, how to clock in, clock out, what is the system, what happens if somebody is a no-show, what are the break policies, is there a dress code, specific dress code, what happens if that is not maintained, any use of electronics, any use of company or social media, and the confidentiality that would come from that as well. So I'll just switch over now to the next page, and we continue onward of what are the company specific policies, and they can include any machinery that might be used. Again, we see this oftentimes in manufacturing, and that might come with its own additional safety rules and the responsibility for any belongings if the company provides, for example, a locker, or if it does not, what happens to any personal items that are brought in. In addition, there's, as we said, industry-specific topics as well, and I listed just some of those here. The specific industry might include some OSHA protection, HIPAA rules, import-export regulations, any additional taxation that may stem from that, or any food safety laws for the hospitality industry. Following that, we oftentimes see a rather large portion of the employee handbook is going to include a compensation and benefits section. And again, a lot of this will be a restatement of the specific compensation from the employee agreement. However, this is not going to state a specific employee's salary. Rather, it's going to list out what the company considers a full-time employee versus a part-time employee. What is a salaried employee versus a wage earner employee, someone who's going to be clocking in and clocking out. What are exempt employees and non-exempt employees, as well as the paid sick time, sick leave, and PTO. Now, the actual wages that are paid is something that would be a specific term of the employment agreement rather than the employee handbook. This will only outline the part of the compensation that would determine, is this a wage earner? Is this a salaried employee? And of course, also if the company provides any pension plans, 401ks, any health or vision benefits, dental benefits, maternity or paternity leave, and all other benefits the company might provide. And it's very important that it also outlines and lists all of the company-wide paid holidays in there as well, so that if ever there's a wage question, those can be brought up to show which days the company was fully closed for, so there cannot be a question later on whether the employee was working then or not. In addition, afterwards, depending on the size of the company, there might be a need to put in the FMLA leave as well, Family Medical Leave Act, as well as paid family leave under New York, New Jersey. There's usually a clause in the employee handbooks for workers' compensation, as well as some information on workers' compensation to let the employees know how those claims, if ever, would work, short-term disability, and so on. Also, any other leave that the company might provide, in addition to the leave that I listed, would also be included in the employee handbook. Later would be any information regarding termination or departure from the company. And this part is likewise very, very important, because we are very focused on the relationship between an employee and employer at the time when they're employed and there's a relationship. However, at the time of termination or at the time of departure from a company, it's likewise very important that there's a restatement there that there's still a confidentiality provision in place, that at the time of departure, any and all company property must be returned. It should list within how many days that should happen. Likewise, what are the procedures for any severance, unemployment, if there are benefits, especially health, medical, vision, dental provided, what is the COBRA policy, and where to obtain any additional information needed for that. So, and then of course I'd write in here just a catch-all of any other important policies, because these documents, again, I just want to reiterate, are really very specific to the company. Everything that I've listed before, some of these items are mandatory to be a part of the employee handbook, but a lot of the actual terms under those sections, it depends on how the company is structured. And so it's very, very important that these are written to confine to the terms of the and the rules of the company and the policies, procedures of the company, but also in drafting these employee handbooks, that's when we find a lot of the times when an employer is doing something wrong. So as we're preparing these employee handbooks and asking all these questions, we receive answers sometimes that are not in accordance with the law. And that's when we make those edits. So although policies will dictate the terms and what is written in the employee handbook, a lot of the times by writing it, we'll also be able to correct any incorrect policies, procedures, or terms that may be a part of the procedures of the company at that time. So I certainly hope that this was helpful for employee handbooks, and I strongly recommend that employee handbooks be created as a part of any company that employs any employees, even if there's a smaller company, even if they're just a couple of employees. As I said, it is very important because the Department of Labor, or typically through any discovery procedure, that will be the very, very first question that is asked is, what are the policies and are they in an employee handbook? So it's very important to really be able to get one down that includes the correct policies that are mandated under the law. But if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Jane at any time. We're always here to help and answer all your questions.
Yes,
Thank you so
Irene,
much,
thank you.
everyone.
Irene, thank you. This was really great. Thanks.